I mean, different people define social policy differently, all right? I mean, I define it in terms of the way governments intervene in the economy in order to achieve certain social objectives, all right? And I tend to talk about the 3 R's of social policy. By that I mean redistribution, which is 1 R, regulation, which is another R, and rights, which is another R. And what that means is, left to its own devices, a capitalist economy will create inequality, will create insecurity, won't address people's social needs, will actually end in a very unsatisfactory kind of society. So we need to redistribute from the richer people to the poorer people within societies, and social policy does that. It taxes people who have more funds and gives them to people who have less, generally speaking. So how to do that, the debates about that, how taxation should be managed is one issue. Regulation is about ensuring, for example, that employers respect the working conditions of people who are in employment, that there is a social objective to enterprises as well as a simple profit-making objective, if you like. And then the third R is rights, that what social policy does is to recognise that people have certain rights to education, to health, to social protection, and how governments do that is the focus of social policy. My particular interest is in what I call global social policy. That means the way in which globalisation, the way in which international interconnectedness, the way in which different organisations like the World Bank, like the International Monetary Fund, like the UN, like transnational corporations, and so on, the way they influence countries in terms of their social policies. So social policy is no longer just the business of one country. Countries can't solve these problems by themselves, of poverty or inequality or poor health. They have to cooperate, but also there are international agencies that advise countries about what they should do, and therefore I'm interested in, if you like, what those international organisations are saying about social policy questions. What does the World Bank say? What does the ILO say? What does international business say and do? How does all this influence the way we try and manage social policies? Just one point on that finally is, because we live in a globalised world, there is a real danger these days that countries compete with each other to gain investment, to secure jobs. And the problem is that because companies can move from one place to another, there's a temptation that they'll move to those places where they have to be taxed less and therefore provide less social security, less social welfare provision. That's a fundamental issue. How to deal with that, how to, if you like, make globalisation more fair, more just, so that there is a global social policy as well as just a national social policy is what I'm interested in. Thinking about the UK and thinking about national social policy for a moment, as I keep saying, you cannot separate national from the international, right? What I see that interested me recently is the amount of concern that's being expressed by social movements and social groups about the failure of some companies to pay their fair share of taxation. Starbucks are not paying their share of taxation, Vodafone are not paying their share of taxation. A number of very well-known companies are really investing in tax havens, in various ways in which they can avoid paying taxation. That's a fundamental issue of social policy. How on earth can governments pay for health, education and social services if there are not taxes from people who are better off and from industry which is better off? And so that is happening now, there's a lot of awareness of it and is a very important issue.